Hey, what's up, guys? We are back for another Tinfoil Hat Society. I will give you a conspiracy theory right off the bat. I hear a rumor that title is going to change, but it's not changing today. Right now, the Tinfoil Hat Society is consisting of a couple friends that have hung around me every week. You guys see them on Breaking the Fourth Wall Weekly. We have Sirenity, we have Kolin, and we have Chris Rutter, and we got a new friend, Kyle. And Kyle's going to be the one that calls the people that give you the quotes that make you hug yourself after he listens to us ramble on today. Guys, welcome to the Tinfoil Hat Society. We are going to continue on because new information has dropped and developed with the Nashville, Tennessee RV bombing. So I'm going to pass it again off to Sirenity because this is kind of her baby, and we'll go from there. And, of course, I know Chris and Kyle, who was not there for part one of this, definitely have their own points of view to probably want to get in it on this as well. So, Sirenity, take it away.
Okay, so last night they've given us a body cam footage video. So I thought that it might be necessary to bring in some experts like Rutter and Kyle that we could talk to about their point of view on the subject of conspiracy theories revolving around the Nashville bombing. Obviously, we all think it's a little bit stinky, and we're going to go through it today.
All right.
Do we have that video to share just because for all the viewers? Do we have a way to pull that up, Chris?
I do not have it set and available while you guys while you guys bullshit. While you guys talk, I'll get it and see if I can't have it run at least while we're talking.
Okay, yeah, that's cool. If you want to try to get that going, then I've got like maybe a little preamble to help Sirenity here on getting everybody kind of queued up for what this video is about.
Yep.
So basically, during the bombing, obviously, the person who did the bombing was in an RV, was on a loudspeaker and all that good stuff. And there was gunfire that was reported first. The gunfire that happened first and then the bombing itself were about 22 minutes apart. And whenever you see this video from the body cam footage, you're going to see that the police are very nonchalant about how close they are to the actual blast radius. And there's no sense of urgency. And they're just like it's almost like, okay, cool, just show us some fireworks, dude, so we can do our thing. And then you don't see any of them like go into high gear until you hear the emergency response coming on the scene, the fire department and ambulances. Then you see them kind of start to hustle up. But before that, they're just like, okay, cool, we're just waiting for this explosion that we know about.
Yeah, it's almost as if they were given a little heads up.
Yeah, which I guess technically they were because of the announcement going on over the loudspeaker and everything. But they didn't know about it until the speaker itself, started with the reports of gunfire at the very beginning. So
they had no idea how big the blast radius was going to be or anything.
Yeah.
They were able to make sure they were clear and safe.
Yeah, they were able to show up on the scene on from where, if you look at the actual footage of the explosion from that security cam, it looks like a huge fucking explosion. But then the cops are just far enough away that it looks like just a little pop in the background, kind of. And so it's, they took a pretty calculated measurement or, whatever on what would be a safe distance from this supposed explosion. Like they kind of knew where the safety distance was almost. It's very fishy, very fishy. So.
And they also do not react. He's getting into his trunk at the time of the explosion, and he doesn't even flinch. He doesn't even get on his speaker to say anything went off. It's kind of like radio silence, and they're just kind of going about their day. And then you start finally hearing a little bit of panic over the radio of more local people saying, fire and rescue on the way, and a little bit more panic. But these people,
they started freaking out, kind of, right?
Well, the body cam person just kind of walked around in a circle, but you kind of heard some other people reacting, but he didn't even flinch. When it went off, he didn't even turn around and look. It was just kind of like, okay, that happened. Now let's walk.
There's like about a 30-second segment where he like covers the body cam.
His body cam, yeah. As ex-military, if I heard an explosion of any kind, I'm hitting the deck. I mean, that's just what I was trained to do. So
Even if
know.
you're expecting it, wouldn't you twitch? Like for me, even if somebody,
Yeah, just the concussion from the blast is going to make you, jolt a little bit.
something, you would react not wanting to. Like your body would just flinch at the sound if you didn't know when
Right.
it was going to happen. But the reaction is no movement at all, really.
Yeah, that's the whole nonchalant or non-urgent response to all of it I was talking about. Just the fact that he was super blasé about it, really, just everything leading up to the explosion and afterwards, until you hear the paramedics and the fire department within a couple blocks. You can hear the sirens in the background. And that's when he starts moving with a little hustle, and everybody around him does too, it seems like, but not until then. It's kind of fucked up the way that they're doing the response of it.
There was even a point, it seemed like they were actually like talking to each other about potentially what the bomb was going to be taking out. Like they almost had an idea of what the objective was for the bomb. They were kind of discussing it between the two officers that were nearby.
He was talking. I don't know if he was talking to dispatch or another officer who was a couple blocks over, but they were like, "Yeah, here it is."
This was the shortest video I could find, so I went with this.
There's a lot that I've sent to you.
Oh, there was, but I was looking for the shortest one, so that way we're not keeping everything on. Jesus Christ, it's just a lot.
Kaboom! There goes a tire or something.
Yeah, I mean, you're hitting the deck with or without training, and there's definitely going to be a huge flinch. Do you have the body cam footage, Chris?
I could look it up at that. Like I said, I was looking for the shortest thing, so I wasn't taking up the screen with just that and not paying attention to what everybody was saying.
I sent you the body cam footage on Facebook to your account, Chris.
Yeah, we can fast forward through it just to give everybody kind of the premise of it. But it's a very telling video. That video you just showed is from security cam footage across the street.
Right.
Right.
So
Well,
what the RV was saying was kind of awkward. So as they were further away from the vehicle, you could hear them say, your primary objective is to evacuate the area. And then as they walk by the RV, it says what everyone knows it says.
yeah, don't
And
approach this vehicle. Yeah, don't not approach this vehicle.
Well,
and then as they're walking away.
So he was in the van.
Yeah, he was in the van.
He was in the van. Okay.
Somebody was controlling the noises for sure.
Right.
Definitely.
Whether it was someone in the van or someone remotely close by doing it with Bluetooth technology or something,
Okay,
you don't know yet.
so this beginning portion is before everything, and they actually go up to a homeless person by name, wake them up very nicely, and let this homeless person know that they need to evacuate the area. So these police officers are being really nice, know the person by name, and they're waking them up to alert them to leave the premises because of the RV. Kind of putting a little hero spin onto the video, and there's no other reason to put this part into the video.
And for those that want to know, like obviously you can see up above the URL to be able to see this video for yourself. I am going to leave the sound off, just so that way it's not conflicting with the conversation at hand. But if you want to, we're going to talk about the things that are being said or the things that are happening. But at the same time, if you want to see and hear the video for yourself, just go to that URL above and
Here's the point where they're kind of talking.
They're talking about how this houses the cell phone networks for AT&T, which covers the area of Georgia. Let's remember that this is the buildings that cover the area.
Across the street.
And what they didn't realize, even though that they knew that the central telephone part that they were going to fuck up was there in Georgia, they didn't realize it was going to be as far reaching as it was. Because we're in southern Indiana, almost 300 some odd miles away from where the bombing happened.
Right.
And our cell service was completely screwed up for the whole weekend. And whenever I went a little bit further south, I went to visit some friends for a couple days, and I went down to central Kentucky, and they had services restored for a minute, and then everything dropped again. So it was a lot more far reaching than what they were originally thinking. This ended up taking like about 7 or 8 states. One of my friends works for AT&T, and he kept getting service calls all day. It ended up affecting like 7 or 8 states, from Tennessee and down to Georgia, up here to Indiana. all the way up as far north as Indianapolis.
Right. Now, most bombs have some sort of like timer, you know, like T minus such and such time. If you can see that the officers are actually just walking directly across the street from the RV right now as we speak.
Yeah, you saw it.
They don't seem to be very freaked out about the fact that this thing could blow at any second.
Yeah.
That was kind of telling.
Well, I mean, what are they going to do? They got to make sure there's nobody standing there. So they're just doing their job, trying to get past it as quick as possible. But the thing that interests me is look at the buildings that are across the street. I mean, I just saw B.B. King's Blues Club as they just passed. And then there's Hooters up the street, too, right nearby. So if they wanted to hurt people, they easily could have blown that up during the day and really hurt a lot of people. But their objective was not to do that. So what was their motive?
Well, again, we kind of discussed this in the first episode. I think the motive, besides like we worked out the target being those machines, the voting machines, or the cooling system for the voting machines, I think the other target was cops. I think they knew bomb squad or patrolmen would be coming to take a look at the vehicle that's over the loudspeaker saying, "Hey, I'm going to blow up in 15 minutes." You know,
if this was not a false flag.
If this was not a false flag, then the target was cops. If it was a false flag, obviously the target was covering evidence of voter fraud. Because why else would you target a place that you knew had
involvement?
What if it's actually a little bit more sinister than that? What if it's actually an attempt to show how fragile our infrastructure is?
I have thought about that.
Then I would think it would be more civilian casualties. If you want to prove how easy it is to infiltrate.
True. You know,
that is true, but at the same time, if you want to make a big enough statement, I took out your infrastructure and people just as easily with an RV.
We already had like a big hack, that happened not even earlier, right after the election. So I mean, I'm pretty sure they've kind of already disclosed that.
I mean, they've established it to a point, but here they actually proved what they've been talking about, and I get what you're saying, Chris, and I'm following what you're talking about with it. Maybe it's cop targeting, and if that's the case, then thankfully, the guy died during the blast or whatever. But maybe he deserves a little bit more punishment. But I think looking at it from showing us without casualty how many people were actually affected by a 1 pound of plastique properly placed. Mm-hmm. How many people it actually affected in central United States?
He was covering up the can.
You're talking like 7 or 8 states. And according to AT&T, my buddy who works at AT&T, he said approximately 11 million customers were affected by this. The entire weekend they were blacked out unless they were Wi-Fi. So, I mean, that it's a really exaggerated example of how easily our infrastructure can be really fucked with very easily. But also, doubling it up with, the Kraken system or the supercomputer. The fact that they're able to take that out, which actually housed like 65% of the voting outcome for the United States. It's a huge database, and you're taking out a supercomputer. One of only, I think it's only 5 that are like it in this part of the United States. There's several on the West Coast and East Coast too. But there's only about 5 of them in mid-America, I guess. So it is a very specific target, and just the responses that we got from everything. And this body cam footage is another example of how blasé they kind of were, So
now, if I were to play devil's advocate, I do want to add this in because again, with lack of evidence, and I don't want to be the conspiracy theorist where everything is extremist, as it were. I want to be fair in something that we didn't even say in the first episode or the first part of this. And I want to say that it's a very good possibility as well that this man just simply cracked under being under lockdown for the past year. Maybe he's lost family members to COVID, whatever the case may be. It could very well simply be, although I don't believe it in any way, shape, or form, but, to play the devil's advocate, it could very simply be that this person who normally would not have hurt a fly just spent too much time locked in his own house. And
he went cray-cray. Maybe he just went crazy.
Has anybody seen any released background yet on who he, like, what is his background? Was he ex-military, anything like that?
Was he a former AT&T employee?
I don't know. I don't know anything about that. The only thing the only thing that Sirenity has found, I know she stepped away for a minute, that she has found that she shared was like, you know, news footages where they talked like to the neighbors and stuff like that. And they all said he was, you know, pillar of community, never said an unkind word to anybody in the neighborhood, was never somebody that the neighborhood didn't trust in any way, shape, or form. You know.
Yeah.
So
What we
They
know,
also know that he never voted an election. He was not registered as a voter. So if he did have military background, they've said that he doesn't. They did say that there's no background, no wife, no kids. All he has is his mom. He's an IT guy. He's a computer programmer and computer technician. But I have not heard anything other than he is not military and that he never voted in an election.
did anybody talk about the that FBI director's non-ability to put together a decent sentence to explain anything or talk about anything?
Let me tell you, this is intentional.
Yeah. That's all he said was, you know, hey, this is fucking intentional. It's kind of me and Kyle were talking about it earlier today. It almost seems like there's some sort of like partnership between between two agencies going on here, to be honest with you. If we're going to go conspiracy deep on this, the CIA and the FBI have not had any cool relations whatsoever with Trump all the way through his 4 years. They've actually been very antagonistic. Mm-hmm. And this is not unlike what they did with Charles Manson and a lot of other people whenever they did LSD mind control experiments and then they released them to the wild to see what the fuck would happen. This is not beyond, it's not a far reach if you're to look at it from that angle.
Well, I mean, the history of the FBI and the CIA, where you're coming from. I mean, we in the first video we were comparing this in that sense with the FBI and CIA. We were comparing this to the Lee Harvey Oswald frame up and scapegoating of the assassination of JFK until, you know, 30 years later it gets declassified that there was no way the shot came from the fucking book suppository.
Which all of that comes from the same experiment that they were running, which Charles Manson was a part of. Manson was part of that from like 58 till 68. He had been picked up quite a few times, and the authorities told the judges or whoever, whatever precinct he was in, go ahead and let that guy go. Mm-hmm. And there's a recent book that came out about it. Guys spent like 20 years studying all of this, but in the Hashberry Heights area there in San Francisco, there were a lot of people that were dosed and then fucked with afterwards, Lee Harvey being one of them. Him and Manson actually crossed paths. And that was actually documented. And it's just really, really kind of fucked up that the law enforcement agencies knew how far to stay away, were very calm, cool, and collected, didn't react in any kind of way when the explosion happened until outsiders came in, like the EMT responses and emergency response teams and all that stuff. Then they kind of picked up the pace. And if you'll notice from the body cam footage, all of the shops and everything, they did a good job of evacuating the area. But they didn't know how far back to evacuate because it's just a couple blocks back where a lot of people are from this point of view.
I actually just spoke with one of my friends who their family has a business in that building that is now destroyed. They said that it's room 261A of the AT&T building stored these cooling towers, and that it doesn't make any sense to the business owners either because they've seen all the same footage, but the destruction is much larger than what it would appear from the footage.
Right, and like that one security cam footage that Chris showed on the first video a few minutes ago, that explosion, even though it comes out the front of the building and it's very violent and abrupt and there's a big bang, that explosion doesn't look as big as what you see from the body cam footage, even though it's very far away. It looks like a little poof in the background. So there's a lot of distorted views on being able to show people like what the actual blast radius was or what the strength of the blast was. And, you know, finding out it was less than a pound of plastique that was just placed properly so. And if this guy didn't work for AT&T, how do you know where to put it?
Well, yeah, and the cops knew how far away to be.
Right.
And they didn't know how much was in there. They didn't know how much explosives was in that. Whole RV could have been full of explosives or some shit, you know. And they're going to be like, "We'll be on the other side of this building here. We're safe." How in the hell did they know that?
Well, to be fair too, and I'm going to talk a minute about something else that I reported on the Chris Stolle show that happened here in Philadelphia. But it's to respond to not only Serenity's it's worse than it looks on the camera, and like we said with this footage and the footage I showed previously where the explosion looks a little different. That is all, resolution of camera, how far away you are from the explosion. A lot of things do that, and what I'm going to reference
Conjecture.
Conjecture. What I'm going to reference is the Philadelphia riots as an example. When we had the riots here in Philly and they were tearing through like this shopping center with a Walmart and a dollar store and all that stuff. And when you watch the actual rioting and looting, it looked bad, but it didn't look that bad. It wasn't until like 2 days later where people were going into these stores where you saw the actual damage afterwards that you realize, holy shit. And the parking lot where cars were on fire and stuff like that. Right now, these camera angles, regardless of how big the explosion looks, may look like it's kind of superficial damage, but a couple days later, somebody with a cam phone is going to walk into the buildings and we're going to see the actual significant damage, and it's probably going to seem a lot worse than we thought.
Within the building, definitely it's going to look a lot more savage than it looks like from these cursory views like this. That's for sure.
Especially if it was directed like what they had the stuff in that movie Backdraft, where the fire marshal would go in and inspect. I mean, we haven't even gotten reports of what the damage was inside. How do we know? There might have been more explosives that were inside that we don't even know about yet because they're not releasing it.
Right.
There could be all kinds of hidden shit they're not telling us.
It's like 20 to 30% of the side of the building is gone. But that blast doesn't look like it would have done that sort of damage. If you look up Nest footage from that, there's somebody who went outside with their dog, and you could see the blast and kind of see a little bit more about how big it went, but it had an impact. I do understand that 20 to 30% of that building is down.
Well, you got to remember
30% of it is a lot.
you got to remember too, when it comes to explosions, and Kyle, if I heard correctly earlier, you're ex-military, so you'll probably back me up on this. It's not necessarily the flash that's going to get you. It's the compression wave that releases after the explosion that does majority of the damage from a bomb or explosive.
Well, like the shrapnel and whatnot, the debris that's flying around is going to hit you too.
Right.
There's a little bit of a delay between the two as well. You're going to, you're going to feel that concussion maybe a little bit after the actual sound.
Yeah, and you could see by the body cam footage that we were just watching there that the guy didn't. There was no jolt. There was no, like, a lot of guys that are trained. I've seen a lot of people that they'll turn their back and cover their head once they see the flash in the background. And there was none of that. There was like literally no reaction from this particular body cam footage. Maybe they'll release more, or maybe they're holding on to it. And if that's the case, it has to be because FBI and DOD have taken over the investigation. And if it's just FBI, then if they're not releasing anything, we'll never see anything. And that's the reason I was like, well, then let's go ahead and reach into conspiracy here, because this is not the first time they've done something like this. Maybe not on this scale, but I mean, they have fucked shit up on purpose just to make things go haywire and then keep the evidence from us, like you talked about with Kennedy,
Right. And I think that's the biggest thing that points to conspiracy theory for my mind anyway, is and Serenity touched on, based on this again on part 1, is normally the mainstream media, the news outlets, the newspapers, they're always willing to spew out as much information about something like this as they can, and they are unbelievably silent on this. There's no details coming in at all, in any way, shape, or form, regardless of whether or not this was politically motivated. Because like if this guy was a Trump supporter, CNN be all over it.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Which is really very convenient that he has 0 voter registration or record. So that way you can't point the finger either way at this. Mm-hmm. If you look at any of Fox or any similar outlets, a lot of what they're reporting on is basically conjecture, and it's already cycled out of the news cycle and on pretty large scale. But none of the CNN or related outlets, they're not talking about fucking anything at all, other than the explosion happened and 11 million people lost service, and it could have been worse. Is about all you're hearing from them.
Well, that's exactly it. And again, if we went the opposite end of the coin, if this was a white supremacist movement, or if this was, or not a white supremacist movement, if this guy was like, a jihadist, like he converted to Islam, for example. I don't want to offend anybody who's Islamic, but for example, if this guy was an extreme, part of ISIS or whatever else, or believed in that ideology, Fox would be jumping all over it.
Yes.
But nobody's talking anything outside of, this happened on Christmas morning. On to other news. How about that squirrel water skiing?
Right.
Like,
and it's almost like they're circling the wagons while they gather more information, so that way they can come out, whichever side of the aisle the news organization is on, they could come out in lockstep together. It seems like they're just holding on to how they're going to report it, maybe.
Even Fox.
Okay, so there's something called posse comitatus.
Okay.
So you're not allowed, there's a law that says that military is not allowed to do military activities on United States soil. Yep. So the reason that it would be considered a false flag is because they can't go to another country right now. I mean, everything's locked down. So since they're not going to Venezuela to test their new weapons or what their tactical outlets will be if something did happen in a big scale like this, they can't legally do it here because of posse comitatus.
Mm-hmm.
But this explosion looked like a tactical event that they were practicing. And then with the lockdown from 4:30 p.m. on Christmas Day till Sunday at 4:30 p.m., it was just, why during that time, and only for the quote affected areas. So now they're training on how to evacuate a specific area. Mm-hmm. Everyone remain calm, nobody freak out, and now we lock down specific areas and see how that goes and see how our response to that is. I believe it's military.
I'll give you two reasons why I don't believe it's military. However, I do agree with your point of it being tactical. I don't agree with it that being military, because military has practice bases where they could do that. Like that perfect example I can use, and I'm going to use a video game version so most of our listeners will understand. Plus, I don't remember the actual name of it. Nuketown. They could easily they tested nuclear bombs at Nuketown. They could test whether or not an RV full of fucking. Yeah, there's testing sites for stuff like that. The military, although cannot operate a military strike on American soil without it being like martial law, they can, however, do whatever training they want to do as long as it doesn't endanger civilians. That being said, I absolutely agree that this is police.
That was my train of thought on why I was like, if we're going to go deep state with it, then this feels like an interagency, because that looks very much like a controlled demolition explosion.
Does anybody explore the Chinese option?
What's that?
You explore the Chinese option, possibly? I mean, I've heard reports.
Okay, so
candidate from China.
There are, actually Chinese military supposedly doing joint operations with Canadian, up and around the British Columbia area right now. I mean, it's not unheard of. I mean, there's militaries definitely are, even during lockdown, are still going overseas.
I know that Chris has seen this.
I mean, Good. Sorry.
They had that video before the elections where China released a statement stating that they were already inside of our voting systems.
Right.
They had already figured out our computers and that Biden would win either way. Mm-hmm. So the China connection really sinks in when you think, okay, the cooling towers that would have proven the connection of China and the fact that they'd already been in there before we even voted.
Right.
That would have proven the China connection right there. So I do believe that there is a China connection either way we look at it.
Well, I'll agree, and I definitely think, at least in the long term, but I don't know if China would do something like that if they're doing something joint with Canada right now. And again, this may be the arrogant American in me, But I don't think China would do it, because if we turned around and discovered that, Chinese forces were operating out of Canada to attack the United States, there ain't nobody in Canada going to stop us from rolling over on those fucking Chinese operatives. Like, Trudeau would honestly tuck his dick between his legs and be like, look, he's right over there. Leave us alone. You know what I mean? If I met anybody in Canada, I don't give a fuck. You guys are pussies.
Under the guys.
From a communist standpoint, if China, they are cooperating with Canadian military and joint ventures, training exercises, blah, blah, blah. But what better way to kind of distract everybody if you're being friends with your friend over here, and then meantime in your backyard we're fucking shit up. Don't worry, nothing to see over here. And then they sneak, they're across the borders and they do things, which maybe that rules out the interagency part that I was talking about. But it just feels a lot closer to home to me than the Chinese connection. It seems like there would be death if the Chinese were involved.
What if the Chinese are involved because of Biden?
Yeah.
Well,
because the Biden connection.
Yeah, and maybe they did. Maybe it is a Manchurian candidate kind of deal that maybe they did plant, and maybe there's some being aware of the situation with CIA, maybe not FBI so much, but there has to be, our own agencies have to be aware of what's going on with this. I just don't see it in any other way. I'm having a hard time getting past that, because at first the other night, you and me, Chris, were talking about, I was like, what if this is somebody from that got booted out and disgraced with the Proud Boys and whatnot, and they're just acting up. Then I got to look at the chapters where that shit happened, and it was in Raleigh and a couple in Florida and a couple out on the West Coast. There wasn't anything in the Nashville area, so it's like, okay, this isn't like some Trumpster or whatever going rogue, and it isn't somebody. It would benefit a Biden supporter, but like, other than maybe Antifa, like where's the military part that would do something like this? Where's that fanatic at?
I mean, Sidney Powell is pretty much all over the fact that China has, had their hands in every bit of this election. And as far as from funding all the way down to, the software and whatnot.
We got a minute before break. Just let everybody know.
What's that?
We got a minute before break. So
cool.
Yeah. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me if they did, do that to try to get their name out of the pictures.
Erase the records.
Yeah. Basically to prove that, no, we don't have anything to do with this.
Seems like a really good way to fuck with us, though, if they left their fingerprints on it.
Well, let me.
It's a good way to screw over Trump too. If his investigation is going somewhere, it's a good way to screw over Trump.
Well, let me play the devil's advocate for you guys before we lose signal and go to break. To think about for part two, let's play the devil's advocate and say the liberals are right. We pointed the finger at China. What if it's Ukraine or Russia?
Yeah. Russia's becoming a player again, and Ukraine is always. I mean, they're diabolical as fuck right now. So I mean, there is that. Definitely.
I don't think that there's any water in that tea. Okay, I think that the owner of the building